Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is 8-Sided Freaks. Today we have a two-man show with myself and Anthony Miranda. And today we're here talking about UFC Saudi Arabia, which ends up being a pretty good fight night card. It was a great fight night card, and then we had a couple of cancellations, so it's a little bit lighter on the total of fights. Still really good fight night card. So no complaints from myself, especially when you're getting a former champion in the main event against a rising contender. So pretty good main event there. And then we don't have any fights to recap because there were no fights last week. And at the end, we've got two fight announcements we're going to discuss a little bit as well. So we're talking about UFC Saudi Arabia, previewing the main card. And then after that, we're going to quickly touch on some final thoughts. And then we'll look at some fights that were announced. So that is the docket for today. Anthony, you can lead us off right at the main card of UFC or main event of UFC Saudi Arabia. Israel Adesanya, Nassourdine Imavov. What do you make of this matchup? And it's a little bit of a unique one because this is the first time Izzy hasn't been in a title fight since 2019. So that's like 6 years at this point. What do you make of this matchup?
I guess that maybe is why it feels a little bit more fun than a traditional matchup. Is maybe just because it's something we haven't seen, like you said, in that long. Where it's is he just versus a prospect, not necessarily a champion or someone who is even former champion or someone he's fought before, and all that stuff. So, because I was gonna say, I mean, I think this is a little fun matchup. I don't know if where the people's minds are on Izzy at this point, if he's truly washed, or maybe he's just not straight championship caliber, especially maybe not enough to beat DDP. But if you still think he's got it to go ahead and take one of these top contenders down, but also maybe this will see how people's outlook on Imavov is if he's really ready for that next step because he's been beating some guys. Cannonier, just like 40 something though. There was the one before. I mean, he lost to Strickland. He's been having some questionable decisions, but then it's been looking better, still winning. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say questionable decisions. He hasn't been outperforming these people or dominating, I would say, but then got that knockout against Cannonier. And so this is a good spot for him, too, to, I think, beating Izzy, even if he is maybe over the hill and a little bit washed, I still think is a pretty big sign, especially if it's going to be like a straight striking matchup, or we'll see how it plays out, too. But that's always a tough task. I don't care how old Izzy is.
Yeah, exactly. And Imavov, I like the way you phrased that of like hasn't necessarily been getting, favorable treatment by the judges, but some of these fights are like he's just kind of winning fights where it's neither guy is necessarily looking great and he's coming out in better shape. The Dolidze fight's a great example of that where he looked less sloppy than Dolidze when that fight went late. The Brendan Allen fight, like that fight got real sloppy in the third round as well. And I think Imavov's a really curious case of a fighter. And there's a lot of questions on the Adesanya side as well. But I just think it's fascinating how like he gets to knock out in round 4 against Cannonier. Cannonier, like historically, is a guy who heavy pace throughout a fight, paces you in the late rounds. I mean, he won championship rounds off Strickland in their fight. And then he's in there with Vettori. He hit Vettori like 200 times and didn't gas with the output there. And Imavov fights him, and Imavov knocks out the guy who's usually pacing people. He knocks him out in the 4th round. And you can say it's an early stoppage. I would agree with that, but like he's still going out there and hurting guys with his hands. In round 4, a guy with good cardio. But then you can contrast that with like his last fight, which is so he went from the Cannonier fight into a 3-round fight with Brendan Allen, and it looked like he was going to pass out when the 3rd round ended. Like, and then you can go back to the Dolidze fight, and that fight looked like he was going to pass out in the 4th round. Like, it's really weird to me. Some of these highs and lows in the cardio department, and that's a serious thing when you're trying to win 5-round fights against for future fights. If he wins, he'd probably be close to a championship fight. But even this fight here, like if you're starting to fall apart in the middle of round 3, like that's not good when you got 5 rounds with Adesanya. And Adesanya didn't look like a cardio warrior his last time out, but like he didn't look god awful.
Yeah,
Like
which is a
Imavov's
huge
like,
difference too.
yeah, exactly. Imavov's like falling over in round 3 against Brendan Allen his last time out. So I think that's a fascinating aspect of his game. And for Adesanya, like, I don't know where Adesanya sits. Like, Adesanya has been in title fights for so long. And I think in the Strickland fight, his motivation really dropped a lot. And I think that's kind of evidence of the fact that he got a DUI 10 days before the fight. Kind of a tough to say you're all there when that's happening. But I think he was a little bit more motivated in the Duplessis fight. And I think I could understand why people would say, oh, he's washed or oh, this or oh, that. But like, I don't think he looked terrible against Duplessis. Like, he lost, but like, Duplessis also went out there, pushed the grappling pace, and did some really good things on in his own right. So I'm kind of curious as to whether this is like, is he getting one more and calling it a career, or whether this is he trying to get back to the title picture. I really don't know the answer to that question. And I think that makes a big difference when you're trying to make a prediction or outlook a fight.
Yeah, and that's why I don't know. It's what's tough for me because I was so ready to just say Imavov originally because like you were saying, I haven't been the biggest Imavov fan, and it's because it's like sure I can see the talent sometimes. I see why people are big on him when he gets stuff going, but the gap between his good and the bad is so huge, and it's too consistently. I feel like I keep seeing bad in all these fights, and so that's what makes me hesitant on him. To where I'm just like, you guys like this is really like the next champion. Like he's ready for it too. Because there's also people that were pushing, him to fight for the belts between a couple of these fights. Because I mean, he has a pretty good streak going too, where he had, um, but but now I'm kind of back on the train of like, oh, maybe Adesanya's not washed though. Like maybe he has another good little performance in him now that it's no longer fighting, the best of the best for every single fight. Maybe that slight little step down will be enough to um, get him get one of those vintage Adesanya performances though. So I don't know. This one is tough. I'm going a little bit back and forth with it now, but I am tempted to. What are the odds too? That's what I was going to look at.
Yeah, I got the odds pulled up here. So the
Okay.
odds are Izzy as a minus 164 favorite, Imavov a plus 124 underdog. That has bounced around a little bit,
Okay.
kind of depending where you look. Because I saw Izzy at minus 155 last night on a different sports book than the one I'm looking at right now. I have multiple downloaded on my phone, so
Uh-huh.
this is kind of the one I click on today. Um, so and it's also money has been coming in on the Imavov side. So I think a week or 2 weeks ago, it was closer to the minus 180 mark for Izzy. So it's kind of been dropping. And Imavov's been the one getting the money. So that's kind of the betting trend on the main event so far.
Because I'm not gonna lie, I was expecting Adesanya to be a bit underdogged after his last performance and such. But that was just because I was gonna say I'm tempted to still go Adesanya as an underdog pick, but I guess it's not an underdog pick.
Yeah. One thing that I find interesting is that also I pulled up the Imavov run here in the UFC. 7-2, 3-fight winning streak over Dolidze, Cannonier, and Allen. And that's like kind of what you mentioned. I mean, the Cannonier fight, he looks phenomenal, in my opinion. He looked great there. That is probably his best fight in the UFC by a massive margin. And then the Allen and Dolidze fights are filled with like him winning, but like it's filled with like concerns. Um, and that's kind of the question for me. And then prior to that run, you've got a no contest against Chris Curtis, which he was winning and looking good in that fight.
Yeah.
Prior to the no contest, I believe that was either a headbutt or an eye poke. Um, and then there was the Strickland loss. The Strickland loss, Strickland came in on short notice at 205 and just cardio paced him. And then prior to that, wins over Buckley, which has aged well, Shabazi and Heinisch, lost against Phil Hawes, and then some win over Jordan Williams. So like it's been a good run in the UFC with the losses being under some interesting circumstances. I'd say the Sean Strickland loss is a little bit of a unique circumstance. Guy comes in, you're cutting for 85. He comes in on a short notice. The fight gets moved to 205. Strickland's probably walks around close to 205, didn't cut any weight, and came in great shape. Like it's a tougher matchup in my opinion in that scenario than a Strickland like prepared
Was
at
that a
185.
5 rounder too?
Yeah,
And that's the toughest, one of the toughest people to probably try to fight for 5 rounds. So
yeah. Especially if you don't knock him out early, and he didn't cut weight, so his chin's got a little bit extra cushion on there as you're trying to
hmm
knock him out, and next thing you know, he's just walking at you throwing his ones and twos. So it's a little bit of a tougher matchup in the circumstance. So, um, but yeah, there's points in there where he's looked really good and points where he hasn't looked good. The one thing that I kind of used to put in perspective of this fight is like if Imavov and Duplessis fought, I think I'd pretty comfortably pick Duplessis. Um, I think Imavov probably wins the first round, and then Duplessis starts to Duplessis him, and all of a sudden we're in a sloppy fight, and Duplessis probably finishes him. So when I think about that, it less um makes me less worried about Adesanya necessarily being washed when he's going in there against a guy that like I don't think he could beat DDP either. So I don't know how much to really take from that DDP loss. I think as he looked a lot different. I think he was using his hands and boxing a lot more, just from a styles perspective, digging to the body a lot. But I don't know if that's necessarily enough to sway me to is he being washed or is he losing. That's kind of where I've framed that fight in my mind, if that makes sense.
yeah, I guess with the other thing too, the one of the other drawbacks over the Imavov is I didn't see much, not power, but I don't know. I think you should have more knockouts on his resume. And then it's funny because the one he got recently was that Cannoneer one, who's plus 40. I thought it was an early stoppage, although he was for surely rocked. But I'm just saying that, and then that's also like the one finish you have on your record. Um, and Adesanya, I was trying to look at the last couple times he's been knocked out, but I mean Pereira obviously, but he got subbed in the DDP one, so I still think too, if Imavov has kind of gassed out in some fights, he's not really gonna get. Or I don't. I would say it would be hard to confidently pick finishes in his fights too. So if you're giving Adesanya 5 rounds in a striking matchup, I mean I'm more inclined to take him in that as well. When that finishing upside isn't necessarily uh, a severe factor against him.
Yeah, and I really liked Adesanya's body work against Duplessis. I think he fought way differently against Duplessis than he did in a lot of his fights. A lot of fights, it's the straight shots, teep, kick the leg, feint, try and set up the shot with the feint. But like he was willing to sit in the pocket and rip boxing combinations a little bit more against Duplessis. And I think that could be useful here because like he was sitting down on like combinations where it was just like two pieces to the body. He'd go left hand, right hand body, and then he'd like kick the body. And like I think if he does that against a guy who we have cardio concerns about, I think that's a pretty good path to victory as long as he can avoid the counters that Imavov's going to throw when he throws those shots. So I'm picking Izzy. I've got Izzy. I think in the article I put round 3 or round 4 knockout, just based off the cardio perspective. Which, hey, maybe Imavov comes in and his cardio looks great and like he did in the Cannoneer fight, and I wouldn't then have that prediction. But I've just seen the bad cardio more often than the good cardio. So now when we go 5 rounds, I'm just gonna use that to predict that he's gonna have the bad cardio, but like can't be too confident in like a late round knockout purely based on how much that sways. And if he doesn't gas out, I would then lean Izzy decision. But point is, like either whether it's gasses out or doesn't gas out, I still think Izzy has passed either way. It's just obviously much easier fight if Imavov gasses after, you know, 8-9 minutes and starts to trip over himself in round 3.
I was gonna say law of averages. I mean, he's had a horrible, or like look bad against Roman Dolidze, good against Cannoneer, not the best against Allen. He's probably just gonna come out best performance he's ever had, and Imavov is gonna like
Yeah.
smoke him too somehow. But the other thing with that, I'm surprised if you did take Izzy. Like by finish, by KO, TKO. It's been a while since people have seen that, so I know people. I mean, I know fans would be excited to see that ever too, but those Adesanya fans really need that too. That would
Yeah.
be a lifesaver for some of them.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have forgot how good Izzy was. Like, a lot of people didn't catch those Whitaker fights, especially the first one. lot of people have never seen the Gastelum fight at this point. Like a lot of new fans that really came in after the initial Adesanya bursting onto the scene, and that's not a bad thing. I'll
Hmm.
always say I want the sport to grow, so I welcome new fans with open arms. But I think that's reflected in some people's kind of opinions in what Izzy has done and what his career looks like as a whole when they've just seen him out there, which I think him against Strickland is probably the worst he ever was in the UFC. And then against DDP, hey, DDP's turned out to be, may not look pretty, but like he's turned out to be a pretty good champion just purely based off the names he's starting to rack up on his resume. So I'm really not going to hold that loss against him. And Pereira, I mean, look what Pereira's done, splitting 1-1 with him in the UFC was better than a lot of you. Everyone who's fought Pereira twice has lost twice. So
Hmm.
Adesanya's ahead of the curve on that one.
That's the fight that always stuck with me is that Paulo Costa one
Yeah.
when he looked Costa was pretty scary, knocking everyone out, and Izzy just worked him, and then that's what and finished him too, like bad, pretty good. And then Paulo Costa hasn't really been finished. Hasn't been finished since, give or take. I just checked; he only fought like 4 times since. But that's still something we haven't seen him ever get knocked out again, and we've seen him get chunked up a couple times, really throwing hands. But
He's a durable guy.
hmm.
So, all right. Anything else on the main event before we jump down to the co-main?
You said it's in Abu Dhabi?
Saudi Arabia, I
Saudi
believe. Yeah,
Arabia,
Saudi
sorry.
Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. I was just say a good little. I was just say because I do think that is a really good main event for a fight night of what we usually get. So I would say in
Mhm.
general, I love that that's a main event. I think that's ideally what the UFC should go back to is those high ranked, maybe top 5 guys, top 7 guys for a main event. But it makes sense is if it's in Saudi Arabia, why they tried a little harder.
Yeah, that's usually the case. They get the good cards and the good main events over there. All right. Co-main event, we have Shara Magomedov against Michael Venom Page. MVP's coming up from 170 pounds to take this fight. So this will go down at 185, which is Shara Bullet's natural weight class. So Michael Venom Page will be a little bit undersized. And I don't think this is a secret, but this is two strikers. I mean, these two guys really won't grapple anybody. Really, other guys' best path to victory against them is to grapple. And the UFC just said, you know what? We'll just pull Michael Venom Page, throw him in there with Shara Bullet, and call it a good fan friendly fight. That's kind of the logic here in the matchmaking. What do you make of the fight?
Um, I think I would agree with that line of thinking. I think it should be ideally fan friendly. I will say it seems like MVP's under delivered a little bit for what we were expecting when he got his first matchup against Holland. That was supposed to be a fan friendly one. And then I don't know, Ian Gary's not really supposed to be fan friendly. I mean, it could be, but the way Ian Gary fights it never is. It usually ends up being a decision in his favor somehow. Um, and then I've been I've not been on the Shara Bullet hype train. Was his last fight the double split spinning back fist though?
Hmm.
So I think that was a jolt maybe for the fans that weren't on the hype train to at least keep an eye like that. I mean it was still pretty exciting that. So I think it has the ingredients to be one. I don't know though if it will turn into because this definitely could be fight of the night for 3 rounds. So, but I don't know if it will play out that way.
Yeah, I agree that it has a chance to, but I just cannot work up the optimism personally. Like, first of all, I I'm also not on the Sharp Bullet hype train. I've picked against him several times. Um, and the one theme here is he always fights strikers. He can't grapple at all. Like he fights Michael Olajaychek, and that guy is one of the worst grapplers ever in the UFC. Like that guy's bad at grappling. He knocked down Michael Olajaychek, that is, knocks down Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland, right after being concussed, submits him in an armbar. 3 seconds later, when was the last time? Oh, I love Kevin Holland, but he's not doing much winning fights nowadays, and it's certainly not coming by submission.
Well, we just saw when he fought Kevin
Yeah.
Holland just lost to RDR. extremely bad on the ground.
Yeah. So like and then that guy who we just spoke about, Michael Olajaychik, goes out there against Shara Bullet. Yeah, he gets worked on the feet. Credit to Shara Bullet. Well, Michael Olajaychik landed a couple takedowns. That's like bad. Like that's a bad look. And to me, this is kind of we went digging for a guy we know isn't going to take him down. That's kind of what this screams to me. And they managed to strike gold with a guy who's older, who's smaller, and is a big name. Like, so they kind of hit like the holy trinity of trying to build the Shara Bullet hype train a little bit more. And to me, I remember when Michael Venom Page said, I don't want to fight Wonder Boy because our styles will kind of cancel out and it'll just be a boring fight. It's like, well, I could see that happening here. We just got two guys trying to kick each other in the legs. Nothing happens. And then we give the decision to Shara Bullet because we're in Saudi Arabia and he has one eye, so he can only fight over there. So for them, it's a pretty good financial opportunity if he's good and has to continue fighting in spots where he can be cleared by the commission. So it's a very, very strange fight to me. The odds here, I'll put those up as well, kind of reflective of that. Sorry, just 1 second. But Shara Bullet is the favorite, and it is minus 188 on the Shara Bullet side, plus 146 for Michael Venom Page. So the odds kind of, I mean, if you started at a pick 'em and then go, one guy's smaller, one guy's more likely to get the robbery decision, you just kind of ease it up one way. I think the line kind of makes sense, and it's kind of how I view the fight as well. I'd probably pick Shara Bullet, but not with a ton of conviction.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I agree too. That's why I was saying MVPs. I feel like it's underperformed for a little bit of hype he got. Also, but we kind of knew he was way so old when he came over too that we weren't getting what he once was. But it's just they're just cherry picking so bad for Shara Bullet. So I feel like it's tough to keep saying like, oh, I mean, I don't think he's that good. He's not going to be that good, and then he like wins again, and then gets the crazy knockout, and then people are going to come into this fight, and like you said, he's fighting an old dude, and I didn't even know, so he's fighting up too. Yeah, so I mean, I forgot about that. So I think it's going to be a tall order for MVP. And while I would love for this to turn into a fun striking matchup with a little unorthodox styles or like some unorthodox strikes that they can throw, maybe different a little bigger bag than some of the traditional strikes we'll see in what are supposed striking matchups. But I just see this one also unfortunately being maybe a boring decision. But and then like you said, if MVP wins a decision in Saudi Arabia, that'd be colossal. Other fighters have yet to master that skill.
He would have to go out there and like knock him down bad in 2 rounds and like really beat him up. Like he would have to leave him in. I don't think Michael Venom Page is winning a close fight. He'd have to do it like when Raoni Barcelos fought Peyton Talbot. There's like, after watching that, not saying that was going to be a robbery for Peyton, but like after watching that, it's like there's no question here. And not saying Michael Venom Page has to grapple, but he has to leave like that level of like you can't even consider scoring rounds for Shara Bullet.
And I don't know if MVP's shown that yet in his 2 fights in the UFC, that he still has the multiple knockdowns and stuff in a fight.
Yeah. And I will add, like, Shara Bullet gets a lot of love, and especially now for the knockout ability. Well, when you look at what he's done in the UFC, he's got the knockout over Armin Petrosian. All right, I'll tip my hat to you on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've went to decision with Olajaychik. Then he knocks out Antonio Tricoli. That guy sucks. That guy's just not good.
He defended strikes with his face for, I'd say, midway through the 2nd round into the 3rd. He like couldn't even defend himself.
Yeah, he should have knocked him out 20 minutes earlier, like legit 10 minutes earlier. Like that should have been over in the 1st round. The guy can't defend a strike. Like it's crazy it took him that long. But he's just going out there picking at the legs, kind of throwing some shots. It's like commit to throwing your hands a little bit here. And then he's got a decision win over Bruno Silva, and that has aged like milk bad. Bruno Silva was landing takedowns on him, And Bruno Silva, since that fight, I mean, he's been cut. I mean, he has been in a war with Chris Weidman. Like, that's not anything to hang your head on, the win over Bruno Silva. Um, Anything that Bruno Silva has done post the Pereira fight is like kind of been terrible, because before the Pereira fight, he was good. And then he fought Pereira well. Like, he had a fairly competitive fight for the circumstances with Pereira, like went to decision, but he just ate so many shots from Pereira that, like, that's it. Like, he was
Yeah.
done after that. He literally spent the rest of his career having the close fight with Pereira, and he literally since then has gone. Let's see, 4, 5, 1 win and 5 losses, and the 1 win was like a fluky shot against Brad Tavares, who, I mean, Brad Tavares isn't necessarily in the best of shape either. So, long story short, I haven't been enthralled by some of these performances, even in victory, just based off the competition level for Charbullet. And then next fight on the card, we've got heavyweights here. We have Sergei Pavlovich versus Jairzinho, Biggie Boy, Rozenstruik. Pretty big fight for the heavyweight division. You've got one guy who's on a 2-fight winning streak in Jairzinho Rozenstruik, looking to move up in the rankings. I believe he's 8th or 9th right now. And then you've got Sergei Pavlovich, who I think is 4th, just off the top of my head. He's on a 2-fight slide, looking to prevent a further slide. So it's kind of an opportunity where one guy can climb up the rankings, one guy has to fight down. So it's a little bit of a meeting in the middle here to see who deserves to be fighting with the elites, because I imagine the winner is just kind of naturally going to be in there with the higher level opponent. Not to say they aren't high level, but like the winner is going to continue getting high level fights. And for Jairzinho, he's kind of been the guy who's been down towards that 10th spot in the rankings, fighting some guys who are a little bit better, who are above him, some guys who are below him, who he should work, and he works them. So he's had some good performances across his recent tenure. Um, it's an interesting fight, in my opinion. The line currently sits with Jairzinho Rozenstruik as a plus 240 underdog. Comeback on Pavlovich is minus 330. What do you make of this heavyweight scrap here?
Uh, yeah, talk about, like you said, talk about different trajectories or different spots in the on the rankings, because Rozenstruik is someone who I think came in with some hype, had some wins, lost to Ngannou, and then basically got relegated, or then maybe a couple more fights after that. I can't remember win or loss, but at least for the past year or two, was relegated to, oh, bum heavyweight that's ranked. We'll win a fight. It's gonna lose a fight. We'll see. But has won his last two. Pavlovich, on the other hand, was, a lot of people thought he was going to be champion, was the scariest dude in the division. I know a handful of people, I don't remember exactly how that broke down, but it seemed it was like 50-50, 60-40 against him, against Tom Aspinall.
The odds were a pick 'em, just to throw that
Okay.
out there. So that's what it was from a betting perspective. From a fan picking perspective, what you said sounds accurate, but betting odds were pick 'em.
Like, because I had Tom going into that, but I was pretty worried too. Like, that was when Pavlovich was on a tear. And then I want to say lost that fight, and then did he only fight one more time, and was that against Volkov?
Yep.
Yeah. So then lost to Volkov. So now you're at a spot where, I mean, I would assume he's still good. I don't think. I mean, I still think he's talented than most of these heavyweights. Um, that Volkov loss was a little shocking and got pretty dominated too. Was the concerning part. So now you're at a spot where, like you said, now Pavlovich loses another one. Now he's probably going to be like dumped into the the morgue of low ranked heavyweights, where like they had their chance, and then that would be a huge win for Rozenstruik to just to rack up 2 wins in general, but then to knock off someone like Pavlovich, who's still top 5. Now you're talking maybe one more win, or depending on how everything at the top is working out. Talk about a Rozenstruik maybe number 1 contender fight at the end of 2025. Like, who would have thought 3 years ago, 2 years ago? So, and saying all that outside stuff, and then I do think this is a fairly fun matchup that you could make at heavyweight. Give or take, you know, as much as it will be a little bit of a power punching fest, a little bit. But these are two heavyweights that at least have a little more technical skill than a lot of their other the people around them. So I think for a third fight on a not a main event, sorry, a third fight on a fight night though too. This is you can't really ask for much. This is normally what we get stuck with headlining most times. So I think third fight on the card too is pretty good for the placement.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting fight, and I think what interests me is the trajectory of Rozenstruik, because prior to his fight against Ngannou, he was undefeated, and in the UFC, his run was second round knockout, and then it was 9-second knockout, 29-second knockout. Those are like he knocked out knocked out Andre Arlovsky in 29 seconds. Like people were like, this guy is the next big thing. And then goes out there with Overeem. We find out he can't grapple, but then with 4 seconds left, he drills a hole in Overeem's face and gets the knockout.
Early stoppage.
I mean, you can make the argument. I don't think it's a terrible argument, but he's had a really interesting run, in my opinion, where he kind of has bounced back between, like you said. So he loses to Ngannou, and listen, I don't think many people were beating Ngannou that fight. Like, he goes out there, throws one shot, the next thing you know, he's trying to defend a 30-piece combination of overhands. Like, that's just kind of the fight game there. I'm not going to hold that one against him.
And too, it makes me think Ngannou was a little worried too, because you haven't seen him in other fights just start throwing punches 5 seconds in that bad too. So I think it was just a good game plan, I guess, too. But I mean, he went for it and he got it. So
yeah. And then he comes back with Wash Junior Dos Santos, knocks him out. Then he's in there with Ciryl Gane, loses a 5-round decision. Back to Sakai, knocks out Augusto Sakai in the first round. Then we're to Curtis Blades. He can't grapple, so he loses. Then he's got the elite striker in Volkov. This one I actually do think wasn't really stoppage, but Volkov wins that fight fair and square. And then we're back to Chris Daukaus. Knocks him out in 23 seconds. Almeida can't grapple, so he loses. It's just been a really funny run, across the whole. When you look at it as a whole, I think he's got the Shamil Gaziev fight where he just doesn't get finished in the first round, and Gaziev death gasses. Then he takes out Tuivasa. So it's been a funny run in general, and I don't know how good he is really. One thing that I do think is interesting is I think he's shown through this run, and I've kind of laid out this run to say this. I think the guy that was getting those early knockouts was a good fighter, but I think in these most recent fights, he's done a much better job of understanding how to use his tools to win fights, win decisions, get deeper into fights, because a lot of these heavyweights gas out after 5 minutes. Jairzinho Rozenstruik doesn't, just because he's on the smaller side, and that has its flaws, but he's smaller, so he can fight at a respectable level into the second and third rounds, and even in the fourth round and fifth round when it goes there. And I think he's done a much better job of learning how to perform in those instances while also still having the power in his hands. And people can say Tuivasa was washed, but I really liked in the Tuivasa fight how he went from cautiously picking at him and then knowing when to flip the switch and then try and land heavy counters. I think he did a really good job of that. And I don't know if that gets him the win here, just because Sergei Pavlovich is ridiculously big. But I also kind of think what happens if Jairzinho Rozenstruik just takes 5 minutes to be all right, just don't get knocked out. And he just moves his head, runs, throws out some jabs out there. And then you get Pavlovich in round 2, who would just chase him around the octagon for the whole first 5 minutes. And then Jairzinho's out there jabbing him and hitting him with body shots. I think he's got a real path to win here. And I think a lot of people just expect him to get blitzed early. And you know what? If you wanted to blitz early, Jairzinho has knockout power too. And it's not like Pavlovich can't get knocked out. So I think a lot of people are underselling Jairzinho's chances just because Pavlovich is bigger and hits harder. But maybe that's enough to get it done. But I tend to think he's more live than his plus 245 odds suggest. I think like I said, he might go get knocked out in 20 seconds. It's Sergei Pavlovich. But, like, if he doesn't, I think it's going to get interesting quick.
Yeah, I thought you laid it out perfectly because sometimes people are like, "Oh, Rozenstruik, he was good. He completely fell off." And it's like, what? Because he stopped knocking people out in 20 seconds? Like, dude, he was fighting worse people. He's landing 20-second knockouts. He's a better fighter than he is back then. So I 100% agree with that. And then, funny point, you bring that up. I'm looking at it like Sergey's wins themselves, though. Derek Lewis, 55 seconds. Tai Tuivasa, 54 seconds. Beat Shamil in the first round, 4 minutes in, and then beat Curtis Blades in 3 minutes. So, like you said, maybe if Rozenstruik, who has been working on his cardio, working on pacing himself better, if he takes that first round, stays alive, now Sergey loses some of his scariness in those second and third. So I agree. I think I also think it's a little bit more alive than other people, and I think it would be a fun little story to see Rozenstruik win. But um, I will probably still end up just banking on uh, it's what I've seen from Sergey before. I thought he reached a higher level. I thought just a little bit more technical with some of his striking, the size. So I'm still probably going to lean for sure the the favorite with Sergey, just because I think Rozenstruik would have to fight a really really good fight to win. To where I think Sergey can, not have be the perfect fight and has a better chance of coming out on top. But I will definitely be sprinkling on some Rozenstruik action though.
Yeah. I'm probably going to pick Rozenstruik when it comes preview time, but, like, I feel like our heads are in pretty similar spots. It's just whether you want to take the plunge on, like, whenever we make picks, it's like a lot different than when you're making bets, obviously.
Hmm.
Like making picks, like in this scenario, Sergey's probably the safer pick. You're making bets and you're getting plus 245, You don't get extra wins if you hit on the plus 245 underdog
Yeah.
when you're writing the preview. And I don't mind taking the stab on the underdogs in the preview. So I may do it and I don't mind taking that angle. But like you said, like I think there's like if someone says like I'm taking Pavlich, he's gotten to a higher level. Like I completely understand that. And the difference of these guys whenever they're face to face is going to be probably shocking. Like when they do the face offs, it's probably going to be this face to face will probably be look bad. Pavlich is massive for the weight class. Rozenstruik, I wouldn't necessarily say is a tweener, um, in between heavyweight and light heavyweight, but like he's much closer to being like if one of these two guys were to make light heavyweight, it'd be Jairzinho. Like Jairzinho probably could, if he wanted to, take like a year of strict dieting and make the weight. It'd be really, really hard. Not saying he should, not saying it's easy, but like point being, there's like a path where he could maybe potentially do it. There's like Pavlich would have to cut off an arm. Like
Yeah.
that's my point here. Um, you can kind of make a wishy-washy case versus no shot in hell. There's just a different size humans in there. Like if we had a 220 weight class, Jairzinho would probably be in that. Like
Well,
Pavlich wouldn't even be able to make that one. Point
s-
being,
speaking of cutting off arm too, I just checked. Like Pavlovich has a 6-inch reach advantage too. So
yeah. Which if he goes out there, I'm interested to see where we talked a lot about like Adesanya and where he sits in his career. I am interested to see where Pavlich sits after his last performance. Where I mean, that's kind of a tough one to bounce back from. You're Pavlich. You're from all accounts like he was beating Volkov in the training room. And like he goes out there in a fight and gets dominated pretty soundly by a guy he's used to beating, and just like it looked like a different level of fighter. And Volkov's listen, he's been great. He's beat Gan in 99% of people's opinions. Like that's not even against Volkov, but like if you're in Sergei's shoes and that's a guy you used to beat the shit out of, and he comes in there when it matters and beats the shit out of you, that's probably a little confidence shaking as well. I do think that's an aspect of this.
that was one of the first times in recent memory too that I saw some. So he was flustered in there too while it was happening, and I was like, that is not a good sign. And then I
Mhm.
heard the whole thing. I think he like pushed him
Yeah.
after the fight was over and stuff. So it was just a bad look all around.
Yeah. With the Aspinall fight, you can be like, oh, he caught me. I
Hmm.
hit him with a good one, and then he caught me. Like, there's no anything in the World Cup fight. It's like pillar to post domination, so it's a tough one to bounce back from. All right, this next fight on the card is one that I am excited for. Vinicius Oliveira versus Saeed Nurmagomedov. Saeed, no relation to the other Nurmagomedovs. He just has the same last name and is also from Dagestan. Um, Most of the guys from that with that last name are from Dagestan, so I that's understandable how that happens. So he often gets confused for one of these members of the Habib clan, but he is not. He does fight similar to them, though. He is a really good grappler. I will say he's got some of the best front chokes in the UFC, like guillotines scattered across his record. Half of them are actually ninja chokes, not guillotines. But like, if you're trying to take him down and he grabs your neck, there's a chance it's wraps. And really interesting striking. He's going to go out there, throws kicks, throws some spinning attacks. Then he's going in there with Vinicius Oliveira, who was asking for this fight. Not many people are like, I want to fight the guy with whose last name is Nurmagomedov.
Yeah.
It's like not many guys do that. Um, he's a wild man himself. He goes out there, throws heavy shots. Both these guys are two of the longest guys in the weight class. Um, Vinicius pushes an insane pace. I think it's hilarious how at the end of every single round two, you're like, oh, he's done. He's cooked. He's gone too hard. He's spilled his gas tank. Then he comes out in round three after the break and throws hard for 5 more minutes. Um, I won't explain how that happens, but there are ways people can make that happen with their gas tank. It's there. And it works for him. I think this is going to be a great fight. Aside from like, I'm not saying this would be a bad outcome, but like, I think there's an outcome where like Saeed is like full of energy and Saeed doesn't have good gas either. But I think there's an outcome where Saeed comes out here, lands like a takedown and chokes him out in the first round. And it's like, it's not a bad outcome, but it's like, I think like the high end outcome of this is like fight of the night. Vinicius pushing the pace, Saeed's throwing his kicks, throwing spinning attacks. I think this could be like a really, really fun fight. So this is one that I'm personally pumped for.
Well, yeah, you got me excited because I've seen Saeed a handful of times now. You know, he has a decent amount of fights, but Vinicius, well, there was that crazy knockout, which I know we discussed. I think last week, 2 or 2 weeks ago, because the other fighter in that, and then I was trying to remember that Ricky Simone fight. I do remember the win. That was last June, but because I always looked at Ricky Simone as boogeyman-esque, as if he'll beat a prospect. He's pretty solid, pretty well rounded to where he'll beat a prospect. So I think he's a great name to have on your record. Um, and yeah, talking about that gas tank, Oliveira threw 237 strikes in that one. So, and then Simone went 2 for 11 on takedowns too. So I mean, those are two ways, to maybe beat a wrestler is nonstop pressure with the striking and stuff. Obviously, mixing in some knees, some uppercuts for the takedowns, but then also obviously defending a takedown. Now, Saeed could do a little bit more, a little more tougher with the grappling than maybe Ricky Simone. But yeah, so I'm excited. This is one where I still don't know where I stand with Oliveira, and I think this is a great matchup too to get a little bit more information on him or watch another performance. But overall, as the way you explained it, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and betting odds have it close. Right now the favorite is Saeed at minus 172. Underdog Vinicius Oliveira plus 134. So like a lot of times you have to pay a Nurmagomedov tax, like even
Yeah.
if whether he's related or not. Like a lot of times those guys just start at minus 200 and you see how high it goes. But not in this case. And I think I'm gonna pick Vinicius here just because like I'm not necessarily sold on listen, Vinicius is cardio. Like anyone who can read between the lines gets what I'm saying here, but Saeed's cardio, like he's not great on that aspect either. And however he does it, Vinicius is pushing the pace in the late rounds. So I think we're live to see Vinicius go out there and get a stoppage in 2 or 3 just by like he's gonna be in your face. He's long, he's gonna throw his 1-2s and he's gonna throw hooks from every angle imaginable. Not really a method behind his madness. It's just madness, but he makes it work. A lot of these guys, I see him throw like that, and I don't really like it. But he finds a way to like at least connect to where like Yeah, this may not be a great shot. It might not knock you out, but like you have to be defensive. I think he's done very good. He's not out there getting countered silly. Maybe he does when he gets to a higher level, but like right now he's doing good. And listen, he went out there when Ricky Simone went 2 of 11 on takedowns. One of them I know for a fact. I don't know. I only remember one of the two off the top of my head, even though I watched the fight yesterday. But one of them, Vinicius got up in like less than 30 seconds, like 15-second get up. So like one of them, he's up right away. So um, Vinicius did. That's where I'm worried about Vinicius long term is the guys who can grapple him really well. And 2 for 11 against Ricky Simone, I think is a good start for long term optimism. So I'm excited about this one.
That's it too. And I just don't know some of the reason I'm not huge or anything or super big on Saeed is because I'm looking at some of his opponents. Just not a lot of names jumping off to me, and the one that does would be Jonathan Martinez, and he lost to him. He did go 3 for 9 takedowns in that one though. So I mean, got him down, but once again, not like the most efficiency. But I think 3 for 9 is pretty respectable though. But so
Mhm.
I'm curious to see, yeah, with this next fight, which style plays out more and how the fight goes. I'd root for more of a fight, and then I hope it's not that one and done on the takedown and
Yeah.
submission. But we'll see.
Next fight on the card is another pretty good one. Mike Davis versus Faraz Ziam. I'll pull the betting odds right away on this one while I've got them up. Another close one, minus 146 on the Mike Davis side with Faraz Ziam, plus 114 underdog. This is a really interesting one because I think Mike Davis has a lot of talent. Um, One thing that I find interesting about Mike Davis, he could care less about being a UFC fighter. Like he's done interviews where he's like, "I'm great at this. Like I'm pretty good at this, and it goes pretty well." I think his only UFC loss is Gilbert Burns at 170 on short notice. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna in his UFC debut. Like, fair enough. After that, he's 4-0. He just fights once a year, looks really good, and then you don't see him again. This is a pretty, I think, a quicker turnaround than usual for Mike Davis. Mike Davis also one of the best contender series fights of all time, but he's a very physical guy, powerful, good wrestler. Meanwhile, you also have Farasi Ham who goes out there, great distance striking. Last fight against Matt Favola, and I've had my concerns about long term Ziam, but like he went out there against Matt Favola and put Matt Favola's head like in the 12th row with a knee. Like that was a sick knockout. He looked, not only did he get the knockout, but for the whole course of that fight, he looked really, really good. So it's not even just like catching somebody at the end. It's he looked good while doing it, and that was his fourth consecutive win. So both guys are on 4 fight win streaks. Both guys have shown a lot of talent. Both guys a lot of potential. Winner of this, I mean, it's hard to say who gets a ranked fight at lightweight just because that division, all of a sudden you're getting a ranked fight and you're in there with like Jalen Turner. Like it's
Hmm.
just like a tough. And there's meanwhile there's 12 guys who are like I deserve a ranked fight. There's a lot of guys who should get a ranked fight. Like if there's any weight class we could extend the rankings to like 30, you'd pick lightweight just for the amount of guys who are really good on the outskirts of those rankings. So it's tough to say as to whether the winner gets a ranked fight, but I think the winner, a lot of respect. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I think Mike Davis is I think he's good. It's tough. He just fights so infrequently, so it's tough to when you see him do like some fun things in there and excel in certain areas, then you're like, okay, let me see him against someone else. And you got to wait a year again. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, but that makes sense. I didn't know that if that's how he feels about fighting. He's just like, I'm good at it. I will say for Ziam, I actually kind of like him. He was one of my super picks. I know when we talked about like not necessarily prospects, but just people that aren't ranked stuff that I do enjoy fighting. And the thing with him too, I feel like he's been getting better every single fight, which is something that I always like to see. Teed off with that last Matt Frivola performance too, which was amazing. But yeah, I'm a big fan of his striking. Tried to use some offensive wrestling. I've seen some defensive grappling from him, which has made me feel a little bit better about his climb. Uh, if he were to keep winning fights and maybe start getting some of those tougher matchups, but he does have one kind of like you mentioned right here. So I think uh, I think this one should be a really fun one, and I would probably say I don't think either of these guys would get ranked. I don't know, or they get that ranked fight. I don't know, but we'll see. That like you said, lightweight super competitive. I think it would be if Davis were to get that ranked fight, it would be another year until it happens. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it's like I said earlier, like getting a ranked fight, like they probably deserve it, but like join the club. Like how
Hmm.
many guys deserve a ranked fight? Like the the top 10, the 10 through 15 is Renato Moicano, Rafael Fiziev, Paddy Pimblett, Jalen Turner, Benoit Saint Denis. You've got Grant Dawson and Joel Alvarez tied at 15. Like it's tough to get in there and even get a fight booked against any of them, let alone get the number next to your name. So, all right, let's hit some final thoughts on UFC Saudi Arabia. There isn't really a ton of prelims to pick through, so um, if you only have one or however many you want to throw out there, I know there isn't a ton to pick from, but anything that stands out to you on these prelims?
Um, Not much. I mean, definitely, I think them losing the fight's kind of tough because I do remember it being an overall better complete card, but that's what happens when you lose some fights and they get bumped up to the main card. That's hence why the main card does look so good. I think the one we always shout him out whenever we see him, and he's always buried on the prelims, but is Terrence McKinney. I feel like that's one of our quick thoughts staples. Um, I haven't looked real quick. I don't know who he's fighting too much. Oh,
Demir
he fought.
Hadzovic.
I do catch some Mark Diakisi's fights, so I have watched that, but yeah. So I don't know much for the other dude, but Terrence McKinney, super fun to watch. Puts on entertaining KOs that he's performing or KOs that are happening to him. So it'll
Yeah.
be there's a chance for a knockout in any of his fights.
Yeah. Demir Hadzovic fought in 2020 against Renato Moicano. That's the guy Moicano choked out, and Moicano was like, "I wanted to keep fighting. What the hell?" And then
Uh-huh.
Demir Hadzovic was like, "Shouldn't have choked me out, man. That's your fault."
Okay, yeah. I
Yeah.
do remember that.
And then he fought Yancy Medeiros in 2021 and Mark Diakisi in 2022. So it's a very infrequent run of activity for Demir Hadzovic, and I'm pretty sure he's older as well. Demir Hadzovic can't really move, so I think Terrence McKinney's probably going to be able to land the knockout shot. And I think the UFC likes having Terrence McKinney around. He's a pretty good like we always talk about him because he's always entertaining. Like for fans watching, like if you see Terrence McKinney, like you're gonna tune in. And that means he has to win in order to stick around. So like these fights are kind of like,
Yeah,
go get a win, Terrence. This is kind of what this one is. We need to keep you around. We want to keep you around, but you need wins to do that. Here's one of them. Terrence McKinney also has a win over Frost Ziam.
I know. I
Um,
did say
so
that too.
so really well aged win. He went out there and out grappled him, and Ziam was like, "Well, I should probably learn how to do that if I want to
Hmm.
stick around." And credit to him, his grappling's 100 times better than it was when they fought. Um, I'm interested in the Mayra Bueno Silva versus Jasmine Judavicius fight. I bet on like every Mayra Bueno Silva fight, and I've been left with negative dollars from those experiences. And I'll probably fall in the trap again this week. She's going down a weight class to fight Jasmine Judavicius. Interested to see what she looks. She's also training out of Fighting Nerds now, so
Oh,
that 125-pound weight class is fairly talented. I think it's probably the most talented female division right now. And if a former 135-pound title challenger can go down there and make improvements at a new gym and a new weight class, I think it could be interesting. So I'll have my eye out for her. And I'll also shout out Shamil Gaziev and Thomas Peterson. If you like sloppy heavyweights, that will be sloppy. Can Gaziev get the finish before he death gasses?
yeah.
If he death gasses, will Thomas Peterson also be death gassed? I thought about betting that fight because Peterson's like plus 285. And I'm like, well, all he has to do is survive 5 minutes. And I was like, well, wait a second. After 5 minutes, he's gonna be dead too. So like
Yeah.
after 5 minutes, who Lord knows what's going on there. But that's a more of a funny fight than
Yeah.
anything.
It's like there's couch warriors that are like, "Are you kidding me? These are what peak professional athletes look like." And then when they say that, I'm like, "Okay, on this one, you might be
Yeah.
right. I can't say much."
Yeah, you got a point. I can't argue.
Uh, and the other one I was gonna joke about the Bueno Silva. Hey, training with the fighting nerds. What if she comes out straight hands, knocking people out? So that would
Yeah.
demon of the division at that point.
Yeah. She's also got good front chokes as well. She's a little she's got that ninja choke over Holly Holm, so she may catch somebody as well. That's a possibility. All right, let's move over to some news. We got 2 fight announcements here. The first one I wanted to throw in here because I'm not too happy about it. Marvin Vettori, Roman Dolidze, her rematch. Marvin Vettori's last fight was against Roman Dolidze. They fought in a 3-round fight 2 years ago. Vettori has not fought since. And he's going in there with Roman Dolidze, and it's a main event. So that's just wait until that fight card rolls around. Hopefully it's bookend by pay-per-view so we can just like not talk about it. But like when we talked about UFC matchmaking, we talked about either the first episode of this year or the last episode of last year. Like, good Lord, this is a bad one.
Like, you waited 2 years to do this. Like, this is what you booked to. Like, no, I don't know. There's not much else to say. That is horrible.
Yeah. This was more on here so that I could complain. Like,
Uh-huh.
Also, like nobody really cared about the fight the first time, and now we have to go out there and see it again. Considering like Marvin Vettori could have fought anybody, and also, how old do you think Marvin Vettori is? Because this is shocking. Because I just saw it, and I would have never guessed it correctly.
Um, I would have thought. I mean, I don't know how young he came in, but in the fights I've seen, the 5-round times I've watched, and how many times he's got hit in his head, I would think he'd be like over 35, like maybe.
He's 31.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I would have thought he was way older.
that's what the Italian wasn't the Italian stallion right there when he
Yeah.
came in. So he was young gun, but
Yeah. That's hilarious. But yeah, he's been hitting the head a lot, and like that's gonna be a pretty bad fight, I think. I don't really know what the point of that is. Like, we could have like someone could have fought like Jack Hermanson or Reiner de Ritter or
yeah,
Fluffy Hernandez or Brendan Allen. Like, there's some Marvin Vettori got in a scrap with Brendan Allen in a hotel. Just go book that fight. Like, what are we doing here? So
hmm
there's more interesting things they could have done with that, but
I
Marvin
think.
Vettori's back finally. If anyone's excited about that.
Yeah, I was also what a great point, dude. Give Hernandez one of those layups and let him
Yeah.
jump the rankings too. But yeah, that's the other thing. It seemed like it was just two people that they didn't know what to do with,
Yeah.
anything to do with them. So they're like, okay, I guess we'll just match them up together.
Yeah. Also, I completely forgot they have Hernandez booked against another guy that I mentioned. So I completely threw out 2 guys out there who are booked against one another.
Oh, it was Allen.
Yeah, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez versus Brendan Allen. So
See, and that's a little tougher of a fight. Should have given him the layup first. No.
yeah. Anthony Hernandez. I think the only problem with that fight is that it's 3 rounds. Like, if that's a 5-round fight, like Anthony Hernandez is cooking him. But 3 rounds, like, opens up the door for Brendan Allen to get like a grimy robbery and just piss me off. Also, shout out to Anthony Hernandez. One time his wife liked one of my articles on Twitter. So
Really?
I did like a final thoughts and I said some nice things about Anthony Hernandez in there. And his wife liked the post on Twitter. So
He's from the Sacramento area.
yeah,
He's
good too.
he's pretty dope. I know I've people that know him.
Yeah. He my only issue aside from the 3-round aspect of that fight is he's a minus 300 favorite. So like I think the days of getting Anthony Hernandez at like pick him against Roman Kopylov are over. I had the Kopylov and him to finish Kopylov, and that was a good one for me. And I think those days are in the rearview mirror, unfortunately.
It'll have to be a big jump up that next fight. We'll see. Like catch him against the top 3. We'll see what they rank him.
Yeah. All right. Last fight announcement to talk about: Mauricio Ruffy versus Bobby Green. What do you make of Ruffy getting this step up in competition? Ruffy, For those who don't know, because some people might have not seen him fight because he's still relatively new.
Hmm.
He is Fighting Nerds guy. I think he's probably the least popular of the male Fighting Nerds in between like Baralho, Prates, Gene Silva. Then you've got Mauricio Huffy. And he's got a couple fights. He fought on a pay-per-view main card against James Yontop recently.
Yeah.
Landed some really good shots, didn't get the knockout, but a lot of people were really impressed. UFC books him against Bobby Green, which is no longer a ranked opponent. Bobby Green has lost his ranking, but still, it's a pretty big step up in competition to where you beat Bobby Green, maybe he's getting a ranked fight, like because Bobby Green's just outside the rankings, and you never know when they'll decide they might pop Bobby Green in at 15 just to get Huffy a ranked fight. Honestly.
Okay. I was blanking because it said number. For some reason, I remembered. That's disingenuous. Or not disingenuous by me, but like we talk about. I remembered the Jones Stipe be feeling like the last pay per view of the year, but like we talk about, Pantoja just disrespecting that man. But it's because I watched one of them at a bar with like bar crowd with everyone, and then the Pantoja one, I was just kind of by myself at my house. So different, little different, but um, because yeah, he didn't ring a bell at first, or ring a slight bell. I was like, who is that? But 100%, um, definitely, I would say the least popular Fighting Nerds, or one of the least well known. I was not in love with that performance. I thought I just thought there should have been a finish somewhere in there. I give tip your hat to, was it Lon Top you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was eating some shots. I just thought there was the counter striking aspect, but he wasn't much there to counter a little bit, because I think the other guy was just getting outclassed a little bit. So I would have loved to see more offensive striking and stuff that I didn't think was there. But I think this is a fun matchup. We'll see. Bobby Green, one of those. I don't find him as entertaining as like a McKinney, I guess, knockout wise and stuff. He has a little bit more personality that carries him on the mic and into fights, but he's an absolute scrapper. So I think I will always be there for a Green fight, especially when he was ranked. That was always something. So I am a little bit pretty interested in this one. I think this is a good fight announcement because, even though Green is very unorthodox in his own right, I think it'll be a good sign to see Mauricio in the octagon again against a step up in competition.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see where both these guys are at. Because you've got Bobby Green's recent run, and frankly, I don't look at anything behind Jalen Turner when it comes to Bobby Green, because like that's literally a fight-changing knockout and like late stoppage, especially considering he's 38 and has been in he's 36-20, or excuse me, 32-16-1. So he's been in a million fights, and then he goes out there against one of the most lethal guys in the division and gets put out really, really bad and eats too many shots.
That was a bad stoppage, right?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really bad. And then he goes out there against Jim Miller and like works Jim Miller pretty good, but he gets hit a couple times and like it was concerning when he got hit. Then he goes out there against Patty and didn't look that great. And part of that was grappling, but I think he got hit with a decent shot on the feet before he got taken down as well. So like I don't really know what to make of Bobby Green at this point, but like Mauricio Huffy, that's a guy who I see the intrigue, but I think he's gotten a little bit too much hype. And like you said, James Yontop, I believe, got cut from the UFC recently. Like, go finish that guy. And people are like to show him doing counters and they compare him to Conor McGregor, and I just think that's kind of ridiculous. I've seen a few too many of those tweets where it's him doing a pull counter in a video and then it's Conor doing the pull counter, and it's like, all right, let's never do that again. It's not
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same. Um it reminds me of the NBA version of that was when people were joking when they did this. They weren't being serious, but it's a Killian Hayes step back and then it's a James Harden step back.
Yeah.
And that was done jokingly. But people were not joking when they did that with Huffy and Conor McGregor. So
Yeah.
I
It's
think
not
he's
the
got a
same
lot of
sense
hype.
of humor for UFC fans.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, I think this is a spot though where if Bobby Green's chin is gone at all, I think they're kind of go knock him out. I think that's kind of what they're doing here. But at the same time, like Bobby Green's chin can be toast. You still got to find it because he's going to go out there and move his head a lot. So interested to see how that fight plays out. And I think it's a relatively interesting booking for the UFC 313 pay-per-view, which is looking to be a good one. We don't have a main event yet for that. Sorry, I don't remember if that was booked on 313 or 314. So that's 313. So that's the Pereira card.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. So 313 and 314 are actually both looking to be fairly good cards. But 313 is the Pereira card. 14 is obviously the one after that doesn't have a main event. So it's a good fight for a pay-per-view to have on there.
Mm-hmm. It's also good because 312 is awful. So
yeah,
I'm glad 313 and 314
bad.
are looking good.
This fight night, like you've got 2 title fights, so like those are obviously really important. But like if you swapped like the prelims and main card of this card is better than the pay-per-view coming up by a mile. Probably could say the same about the UFC Seattle Fight Night card. I'd have to go double check that one, but that's got like a Cruz co-main event and like some ranked guys scattered throughout that card. So like there are cards coming up that are better than that 312 pay-per-view. I don't even that pay-per-view's bad. Like there's like Justin Toff is on the main card against the Dana White Contender Series guy who I watched on Contenders and was like, oh, that guy's not very good. And now they book him and I'm like, holy shit. Main card before a title fight? What the hell? Like, it's bad.
Because we were talking about it last week, and I wanted to say what I had heard was the reason a lot of people don't go there. Like, they always, obviously, because it's in Australia, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they get a lot of Australian fighters. Right now, that's just not the ideal lineup of Australian fighters you would like to see. But I've heard a reason a lot of the people don't go there is the tax is insane over there. So it was like, I don't know if it was straight half, but it was extremely high. And then so for these guys on 10 and 10, 14 and 14 contracts, they have to pay their coaches and their gym. Like they're losing money going over
I think
there.
some guys get double taxed too.
Yeah.
I think depending on what country you're from, I think the guys from Brazil get double taxed, and so they pay the Australian tax and then have to pay the Brazil tax on what they're bringing home after that. It's like if you're on a 10 and 10, you lose, so you walk out with 10. You still have to pay your coaches the same percentage. So you leave there with 10, and then they take 5, and then you still have to pay your coaches 2, but so that leaves you 3. But the 5 that you just had, you're getting shit. If you get 40% of that or 30, whatever it is in Brazil, like you're ending up with like $2,500.
And the only thing is the UFC cover the flight.
Yeah, I believe they do.
Right, the flight and maybe the hotel or whatever. So
yeah, it's not a good. But I will say, Carlos Prates really wanted to fight on that card. He's the one guy who every time they go to Australia is like, please, because he's got a daughter in Australia.
Oh, okay.
So he's like, the only time my daughter can see me fight is when I fight over there, and it's a free little trip to go see your kid because they do pay for the flights. So, but they didn't get Prates on the card, which at the end of the day, you got to find him somebody to fight. And Jack Della Maddalena took the Leon Edwards fight instead, and I don't blame him. So he didn't have anybody to fight. All right. That is it for today's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you want more UFC Saudi Arabia content, we'll have the preview up and we'll have best bets up by the end of the week. And we'll be back next week. I honestly don't know what next week's card is. I probably should have looked before
Isn't
I
it? Oh, no,
did
it's
the
not
little
online.
spiel here. It is UFC 312.
That's what I thought I was saying. Isn't it the pay-per-view?
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was the pay-per-view or if it was Seattle or so we've got UFC pay-per-view next week, which is usually like, yeah, UFC pay-per-view, but like we're gonna have 2 fights to preview, then we're gonna start scratching our heads. So we may have to put a little spin on that one just based off the card quality, but you can probably recap this card next week now that I think about it. So that's probably what we'll do, honestly. We'll talk about the important fights from 312. And then do some recapping for this card. So next week, UFC 312 preview, UFC Saudi Arabia recap. We'll hit 2 birds with 1 podcast and call it a day. Thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe to the YouTube. We appreciate that. And like I said earlier, go to vendettasportsmedia.com. That is all we have for today. Tune in next week, and we'll see you.